Most men never realize this brutal truth. The longer you stay afraid of silence, the weaker you become. But the longer you embrace it, the stronger you are forged. This isn't theory, it's the furnace of reality. And here's the call you cannot ignore. Solitude is not a punishment. It is the raw metal that either rusts into useless scrap or hardens into unbreakable steel, depending on whether you face it or flee. Because the longer a man walks alone, the more he realizes he isn't incomplete. He's becoming whole. So ask yourself, are you ready to step into that silence with me and stay long enough to see what it's been trying to give you? 1. Facing the fear of quiet. They say men fear being alone, but that's not the truth. What we really fear is what the quiet reveals when nobody's around to drown it out. Think about it. Silence isn't empty, it's crowded. Crowded with every choice you postponed, every promise you broke to yourself, every regret you never buried deep enough. That's why so many men rush to fill the room with noise. Music blasting, TV on in the background, conversations that mean nothing, endless scrolling. It isn't connection we crave, it's distraction, because the quiet keeps receipts. Let me give you a different image. Imagine your mind as a deep lake. On the surface, it looks calm, maybe even beautiful. But the moment the water settles, you begin to see what lies beneath. Rusted bicycles, old skeletons of things you tossed in years ago, hoping they would sink forever. That's what silence does. It clears the surface. It exposes the bottom. And most men, when they first look down, panic. They dive back into noise because it feels safer not to know what's really inside. My neighbor, let's call him Victor. For years, he was steady and cheerful, the kind of father who worked hard, waved across the fence, always ready to help. But when his kids left for college, the house turned into a cavern of silence, and so did he. The TV became his companion, glowing through the night like a weak fire in an empty cave. He'd fall asleep to late-night talk shows muttering in the dark, anything to drown out the stillness. And little by little, the friendly neighbor turned bitter, snapping at small things, growing curt, complaining more than he laughed. One evening I asked him why. He laughed it off, said he just hated quiet houses. But the truth was written in his eyes. It wasn't the silence he feared, it was the questions it carried. What did you really build with all those years? Who are you now when no one calls your name? That's the terror of quiet. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of truth. Breathe, let that sink in. But here's the hidden reality. Silence that first feels like suffocation can also become salvation. The same way a blacksmith's fire burns painfully hot, but is the only way to shape steel, silence sears you first before it saves you. When you stay with it long enough, when you refuse to run, the same voices that mocked you begin to fade. The echoes turn into whispers, then into clarity. And that's when something extraordinary happens. You realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable. The ghosts of your past don't define you. They only visit when you open the door. Think of it as sitting in a dark theater. At first, you hear every creak, every cough, every shifting chair. But the longer you sit, the more your senses adjust. Soon you begin to notice subtleties you never caught before. The hush between breaths, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the presence of yourself. Silence becomes less of a punishment and more of a teacher. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of trouble than within your own soul." It sounds lofty, but here's the simple truth. If you can't sit in your own living room with nothing but your breath and feel at peace, you'll never find peace anywhere else. Not in a crowded bar, not in a loving relationship, not in success or applause. Peace that depends on noise isn't peace, it's a rental. And rentals always end. And I'll be honest, I used to be the same. I couldn't even brush my teeth without music blasting because God forbid I'd have to listen to my own thoughts for 2 minutes. It's funny now, but back then it was survival. Tonight or tomorrow morning, I want you to try something almost absurdly simple. Turn everything off. Phone down, TV off. No music, no podcasts, just you and a notebook or nothing at all. Set a timer for 10 minutes. And here's the rule. You cannot get up, cannot reach for distraction, no matter how itchy your fingers feel. Just sit, just breathe. Notice what shows up. Write down the 3 loudest thoughts if you need to. That's it. No judgment, no solving, just witnessing. At first, it might feel unbearable. Your chest might tighten. You might hear the harshest voices you thought you left behind. You're not enough. You wasted time. You're too late, let them come. Don't fight them. Don't believe them. They're echoes, not definitions. And when the timer ends, something small but powerful will shift. You'll have proven to yourself you can survive silence. You can sit with your own soul without collapsing. That's the first spark of freedom. Because here's the thing, the man who can't face his own quiet will always need the world to distract him. He'll keep running to women, to work, to money, to substances, to avoid looking in the mirror. But the man who can sit still, breathe, and stay, that man is rare, that man is dangerous, because he no longer runs, he roots. So let me ask you directly. When the house goes quiet, when nobody's texting, when the room feels heavy, do you rush to fill the void, or do you let it carve you into something stronger? Take the challenge tonight. 10 minutes, no escape, just you. Silence strips you bare, and what it shows next can be even harder to face. If this part hit you, drop a comment below. Tell me what silence has been teaching you. I read them all. 2. Breaking the addiction to approval. Most men never notice the chain around their necks because it doesn't clink like metal wool. It smiles, it claps, it praises. Approval is the drug of our age, and it's more addictive than whiskey, more corrosive than gambling, because it's invisible. You can walk into any room dressed sharp, looking confident, but inside you're trembling, waiting for someone to nod before you believe in your own worth. Think of it like standing in front of a crooked mirror. You adjust your shirt, your posture, your entire self, but the reflection keeps warping. And yet, instead of throwing the mirror out, you keep adjusting yourself to fit it. That's what approval does. It bends you until you don't even remember your true shape. I had a colleague years ago, let's call him Daniel. In meetings, his ideas were gold, sharp, and innovative. But the moment the boss frowned, he would fold like paper. Rewrite everything, dilute his conviction, just to earn a smile. At first, people pitied him. Then they stopped listening. Because a man who trades truth for applause eventually loses both. But this disease doesn't live only in the office. I once knew a father who could never say no to his teenage kids. Even when exhausted, he'd drive across town at midnight to pick them up. Even when broke, he'd buy things he couldn't afford. His children didn't admire him more for it. They respected him less because somewhere deep down they knew. This wasn't strength, it was fear of losing their approval. And nothing erodes respect faster than fear. Here's the twist no one tells you. Women, bosses, even friends. They don't respect the man who bends for approval. They test him harder. They pull further. They sense weakness like sharks sense blood in the water. The Stoics warned of this trap centuries ago. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, Be content to be thought foolish. In plain words, if you're not willing to be misunderstood, you'll never be free. That's not philosophy, that's survival. And here's where it cuts deeper. Approval doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. You start laughing at jokes you don't find funny. You keep quiet when a friend crosses the line. You say yes to dinners you don't want, conversations that drain you, favors that rob your time. One day you look in the mirror and realize you're not living your life. You're auditioning for theirs. Just like Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman, chasing applause until nothing was left. I used to say yes so often that friends stopped asking if I was free. They just assumed. At one point, I agreed to help 3 different people move houses in the same month. My back was broken, my weekends were gone, and still I smiled like it was normal. Looking back, it wasn't kindness, it was cowardice. Approval is like sugar water, sweet at first, but leaves you hollow, craving more. Real respect is like clean water, tasteless, maybe even boring to some, but it strengthens you every day, and you can't drink both. So what do? Here's your practice. Once a day, say no without an apology. Don't cushion it, don't explain it, don't polish it. Just say no and let the silence hang. That's it. One simple act that feels like fire at first, but burns away the chains over time. Because here's the irony. The moment you stop begging for approval, you gain the very thing you were chasing. People notice the man who doesn't need to be noticed. They lean in when you stop leaning out. They listen when your voice no longer asks to be heard. I'll leave you with this. Where in your life are you still bowing to crooked mirrors? And when will you finally smash them and stand tall in the reflection that belongs only to you? And once you stop bending for others, you start hearing something else, the faint sound of yourself. 3. Clarity through solitude. There's a turning point in every man's solitude. At first, it feels heavy, the nights too long, the quiet too sharp. You scroll through YouTube out of boredom, expecting nothing. But then, almost by accident, you stumble on a lecture about history, or a talk about philosophy, or a craft you once loved, and suddenly something inside you stirs. A memory you buried years ago, that guitar in the attic, that sketchbook you abandoned, that book you swore you'd finish one day. Loneliness in that moment becomes a mirror, but also a doorway, because solitude doesn't just strip you bare, it hands you back pieces of yourself you forgot. I knew a man, we'll call him Richard, who used to spend every weekend drinking with colleagues. After his divorce, he found himself alone in a quiet apartment. Out of habit, he scrolled endlessly. One night he clicked on a video about astronomy, a subject he'd loved as a teenager. That spark pulled him into reading, then into local meetups, then into building a telescope on his balcony. I still remember him describing the first night he looked through it, the rings of Saturn glowing faintly in the dark. He told me later, I thought solitude would kill me, but it gave me back a part of me I thought was gone forever. That's clarity. And sometimes solitude doesn't just reawaken hobbies, it awakens the soul. A man sits quietly, for once not trying to escape, and discovers a depth he never knew. Maybe it's meditation, maybe tea ceremonies, maybe Buddhist sutras or the Bible, but through the practice of stillness, he feels the veil lift. The noise inside softens. His thoughts stop chasing. And what rises is something deeper, a quiet wisdom, a whisper that says, you were never broken. You were just too distracted to hear yourself. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Solitude, if you dare to lean into it, is not an exile. It is the inner sanctuary you have been avoiding. Think of it like standing before a mountain wrapped in fog. At first, you see only shifting gray, but then the fog lifts and the peak appears, steady, immovable. Your mind in solitude is the same. Sit with that image for a moment, and let's be real. Sometimes solitude doesn't give you wisdom at first. Sometimes it just shows you how much of your life has been spent trying to escape yourself. That's not funny, but it's the kind of truth that hits harder than any joke. Because clarity isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives in whispers, in rediscovering a forgotten passion. In the peace of a verse you finally understand. In the moment you realize solitude wasn't punishment at all. It was preparation. And here's the hidden truth. Solitude is a filter. For the weak, it corrodes. Day by day they shrink, fading into the background like metal left to rust. But for the man who carries even a spark of longing, of beauty, of untapped strength within, solitude does the opposite. It strips away the noise until that hidden fire stands uncovered. Alone, you don't become less. You become distilled. The weak vanish. The real remains. So think about this. If loneliness gave you the chance to meet yourself again, what forgotten gift would you choose to bring back into your life? If you're still here, take 2 seconds to hit like. It tells me you want more content like this, and it helps this message reach other men who need it. But clarity alone isn't enough. What you rediscover must be protected, or it will be lost again. 4. Boundaries rebuild respect. Most men think boundaries are about keeping distance from strangers or holding your ground at work. But the truth is the most fragile and the most necessary boundaries are with the people closest to us. Because family, love, and friendship carry a dangerous illusion that closeness means permission, that to prove love, you must give endlessly. My Aunt Irina lived this illusion. She was wealthy, generous, and deeply loving. From the start, she believed the best way to show love to her 2 children was to give without restraint. Cars when they were barely of age, lavish vacations, money on demand. She thought she was protecting them from hardship, shielding them from the hunger she once knew. But over time, gratitude faded, demand sharpened, respect dissolved. Her children stopped speaking with warmth and started speaking with entitlement. They saw her not as a mother to honor, but as a resource to exploit. The home she built became a battlefield. And when the arguments grew cruel, Irina would whisper through tears, "I thought my love would keep them close. But the more I gave, the further they drifted. And honestly, I can't throw too many stones. When I was a teenager, I once demanded sneakers like my life depended on them. Looking back, I wasn't passionate. I was spoiled." Here's the truth most people miss. The fault wasn't only with the children. Yes, they became selfish, impatient, disrespectful, but they were simply the products of a love that never learned to say no. Love without edges is like a zoo without fences. At first, it feels thrilling. Animals roaming free, no rules. But soon chaos reigns. Lions clash, elephants trample. Beauty turns to ruin. The animals aren't to blame. They follow instinct. The fault is the missing boundaries. And ironically, men who've lived longer seasons single often see this more clearly. When the house is quiet, when no one demands your time, you start to notice how dignity survives only where boundaries exist, and how their absence poisons love. Pause. Let that sink in. The Stoics warned long ago, No man is free who is not master of himself. The same applies to a parent. No child learns respect from a parent who refuses to respect their own limits. You cannot teach dignity while erasing your own. You cannot raise lions if you treat them like glass. This is the lens most people avoid. If your family doesn't respect you, it may not be because they are cruel. It may be because you trained them unknowingly to live without consequence. And people, even those who love you, will always sink to the lowest standard you allow. When Irina finally realized this, it was painful. She began to notice the small things she had excused for years. Each one, tolerated in silence, had chipped away at the foundation of respect. By the time she wanted to rebuild it, the cracks had widened into chasms. And yet, even then, there was hope. Because boundaries aren't about punishing others. They're about repairing yourself. About standing firm not out of anger, but out of clarity. Irina began small. She stopped transferring money on demand. She required honesty before support. She stopped answering late-night calls unless they were truly urgent. At first, the backlash was fierce. Accusations of being cold, selfish, unloving. But slowly, a new dynamic formed. Her children began to adjust. They may not have liked it, but they started to respect it. The lesson is sharp. Love without boundaries is not love. It is indulgence. And indulgence robs both giver and receiver of dignity. True respect grows not from endless yeses, but from the rare, courageous no. So before you point fingers at the ungrateful people in your life, ask yourself, where have you failed to draw the line? Where have you mistaken sacrifice for love? Because boundaries are not walls that keep love out. They are the structures that let love endure. 5. No emotional reactivity. Control isn't about shutting down your feelings. It's about refusing to let someone else hold the remote to your soul. Most men collapse not because life breaks them, but because they hand over the steering wheel every time emotion flares. If you can't master your reaction in front of people, you'll always be their puppet. I once knew a man, let's call it, who snapped in a team meeting when a junior questioned his idea. He slammed the table, raised his voice, and the room froze. The project stalled, and afterward he admitted, "I don't even remember the question. I just remember losing myself." That's the trap. You might silence the room, but you lose their respect. A man who can't stay steady under pressure doesn't lead. He adds to the chaos. And the cost? Martin had been lined up for a promotion the following week. Instead, that seat was quietly given to someone else. One outburst erased years of effort. The Stoics saw this clearly. Seneca wrote, "He who angers you conquers you." Anger may feel powerful in the moment, but it's a leash when you hand to others, letting them tug you into chaos. Think of it like a chess game. The novice reacts to every move, lunging without thought, blinded by emotion. The master? He sits calm, unhurried, seeing 10 moves ahead. Life is the same. The man who reacts lives like a pawn. The man who responds with discipline plays like a king. Here's the twist of fate. People often test you not to destroy you, but to discover you. A partner may pull away, a colleague may provoke, a friend may mock. They're not always cruel, they're searching for your edges. And if you flinch every time, you reveal you have none. But if you remain steady, calm voice, steady breath, eyes unshaken, you communicate more than words ever could. I am not moved by chaos. There's a reason why calm men seem magnetic. In business meetings, in arguments, even in relationships, the one who speaks less and listens more is the one who controls the room. His silence is heavier than another man's shouting. His restraint is more unsettling than another's rage, because stillness signals power. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Emotional reactivity is addictive. You feel dismissed, you lash out, you feel ignored, you over-explain, you feel tested, you defend. It's human. Yet each time you react, you train yourself to need validation from outside. You become predictable, controllable. Here's the shift. When you sense that trigger rising, pause. Don't reply to the text immediately. Don't storm into the argument. Don't raise your voice because someone raised theirs. Instead, breathe, count. Observe your own surge like a wave rolling in. The wave isn't you, it's passing. And once it passes, clarity remains. This is not suppression, it's sovereignty. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, rain lashing, trees bending. Everyone else is running for cover, but you remain grounded, unbroken. That image alone transforms how others see you. They may not say it, but they feel it. This man cannot be shaken. Pause. Imagine that for a moment at being the one unshaken when everyone else breaks. So I'll ask you, when was the last time you lost yourself to someone else's chaos? And what would change if, instead of reacting, you chose to let the storm exhaust itself while you remained the calm that outlasted it? Breathe, let that sink in. The longer a man walks alone, the more he understands that solitude was never his enemy. In the beginning, silence feels brutal. But as you endure, as you breathe through the fire, the silence itself changes. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like clarity. What once felt like emptiness becomes the soil where strength takes root. Most men spend their whole lives running from this. But ask yourself, what is more fragile than a man who needs constant applause just to remember who he is? Without silence, he never finds himself. Without solitude, he never knows if he has a center or if he's only been held up by the noise of others. The longer you accept solitude, the less you fear it. The less you cling to others, the more others are drawn to you. Because people instinctively sense who has an anchor inside and who is drifting without one. Respect is never truly demanded. It is commanded by the presence of a man who no longer wavers. So if you are in that season now, if the phone is quiet, if the nights are long, if the world has stopped knocking on your door, don't curse it. Don't call it exile. Call it preparation, because solitude is not the grave of your worth. It is the ground where your next self is planted. And when you return to the world forged by silence, people will notice. Your words will carry weight not because you shout, but because you don't need to. Your presence will shift rooms not because you demand attention, but because you no longer crave it. That's the gift only solitude can give, a strength so silent it becomes undeniable. So hear this, silence doesn't shrink you, it forges you. It is not the absence of love. It is the fire where self-respect is lit. And the man who carries that flame is never truly alone. Now let me leave you with this. Will you keep running from the fire? Or will you dare to stand in it long enough to emerge as the man you were always meant to be? If this spoke to you, subscribe and share it with a brother who needs to hear it. Let's grow stronger together, not alone.